Hello, friends, and welcome to Jewels of Truth. My name is Daniel Fontenot. Thank you very much again for joining us. And today, the question to be answered is, will Donald Trump enforce the Sunday law? This may seem like an unusual title, and especially as we begin, you may be wondering, where in the world is all of this going? And this is going to be probably the most unusual presentation that I've ever given, especially on this channel. And this is a continuing series on the book of Daniel, chapter 11. We are slowly going through at least the first few verses. And so let's begin. Daniel chapter 11 verses 2 through 4 states, "And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those." Now, before we I just want to say this also, that if you haven't watched the previous video on this subject, and the previous video, I named it, "What Does Bible Prophecy Say About Donald Trump?" Well, this is a continuing study on that subject. And if you watched the last video, then you saw, hopefully you saw, that the Bible does indeed speak about Donald Trump, even though the name exactly Donald Trump may not be in the Bible, yet the Bible does speak about Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is Xerxes. Donald Trump was prefigured or represented by King Xerxes, king of Persia. Notice what Uriah Smith in his book Daniel and the Revelation says, pages 233 to 234. The fourth after Cyrus was Xerxes, son of Darius Hystaspes. He was famous for his wealth. Now I believe we had this same statement in the last presentation, but I have it here for a purpose just to sort of remind us here. He was famous for his wealth, a direct fulfillment of the prophecy stating that he should be far richer than they all. He was determined to conquer the Greeks. Therefore, he set about organizing a mighty army, which Herodotus says numbered 5,283,220 men. Xerxes was not content to stir up the East alone. He also enlisted the support of Carthage in the West. The Persian king fought Greece successfully at the famous Battle of Thermopylae, but the mighty army was able to overrun the country only when the 300 brave Spartans who held the pass were betrayed by traitors. Xerxes finally suffered defeat at the Battle of Salamis in the year 480 BC, and the Persian army made its way back to its own country. Now, we found out in the last study that the subject of Xerxes, at first he fought Greece successfully, but then later Xerxes finally suffered defeat at the Battle of Salamis in the year 480 BC. So, and we found out that this represents Trump's victory in 2016, and then later his defeat in 2020. Now, I realize there's some issues about that, and I would probably agree with many of you out there that things didn't go normally, that's to say the least, there in 2020. But that's another subject. So Xerxes is the fourth king after Cyrus. Xerxes is a symbol of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is the fourth president of the United States from George Bush. And we covered that. That's why I say you need to, if you haven't watched the previous video on this subject, you need to go back and watch that first, because that lays a foundation for what we're saying in this video. So, and you have to count there after George Bush and Ronald Reagan. Okay, you look at those as two people. They're one because they cooperated together in taking down a kingdom. That kingdom in 1989 was the Soviet Union. So you count there from George Bush, three presidents. That would be Clinton, Bush, and Obama. And the fourth one then is President Trump. Okay? He was the fourth one. All right? Now, this is interesting here. Now, we spoke about this but briefly in the last presentation, and I said that this would have a bearing on the subject when we cover verse 3 of Daniel chapter 11. The name Xerxes means ruler over heroes, hero among kings. Okay? That has a definite bearing on this subject, as we shall see. Related to this subject is what Sister White says in the Review and Herald of March 30th, 1911. Foreign nations will follow the example set by the United States. Though she leads out, yet the same crisis will come upon our people in all parts of the world. Again, that's Review and Herald of March 30th, 1911. So we need to remember that as Seventh-day Adventists, anticipating the enforcement of the enforcement of the mark of the beast, the Sunday law, okay, the United States will lead out in that enforcement. The United States essentially will be a ruler over heroes, hero among kings. Donald Trump is essentially a hero over heroes, a hero among kings. This gets more interesting as we go on. So the definition of Xerxes is in harmony with the role which the United States plays in leading the nations of the world to enforce the worship of the beast and to receive its mark. Donald Trump will be a hero over heroes and a hero among kings. Notice Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 to 17. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and we know that to be the United States of America, and he had two horns like a lamb, those two horns being republicanism and Protestantism, self-government and religious liberty. And he spake as a dragon. Okay? Whenever this scripture says that the United States had two horns like a lamb, but then later he speaks as a dragon, okay? The subject of the dragon itself is interesting, okay? And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Notice it says, he causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. The causing there, however that looks like, however that will look like, it will be in agreement with this definition of Xerxes being a ruler over heroes and a hero among kings. He's leading the world, as Sister White says. The United States and Donald Trump are leading the world to enforce the worship of the beast and his image and to receive its mark, okay? He causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. We will soon, very soon, see this come to pass, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, okay, he's a hero over heroes and a hero among kings, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. Meaning worshiping the papacy who had this deadly wound by a sword in 1798. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause. He's a hero over heroes and a hero among kings. Cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed, and he causeth. He's a hero over heroes and a hero among kings, all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, so that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So the United States will cause or command the nations of the world to form an image to and of the beast, the papacy, and to receive its mark. Donald Trump, being the fourth king or president, will be, as the definition states, a ruler over heroes, hero among kings. Thus, not only is Donald Trump represented by Xerxes, the king of Persia, but he is also represented by Alexander, the king of Greece. Greece represents the world and the United Nations. So you may be asking, can Xerxes and Alexander both represent Donald Trump? Because if you look at the whole narrative in the Bible and the succession of kingdoms, a succession of kings, you have one following another. You have Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome. How can two kings represent one man at the end of the world? Can a figure, and I'm calling Xerxes a figure. Follow my logic here, my reasoning. I'm calling Xerxes a figure, a representation, a symbol. Can a figure or symbol represent more than one thing? Well, notice William Miller's 10th rule of Bible interpretation, which Ellen White endorses, states, figures sometimes have two or more different significations, as day is used in a figurative sense to represent three different periods of time, namely, first, indefinite, second, definite, a day for a year, and third, a day for 1,000 years. The right construction will harmonize with the Bible and make good sense. Other constructions will not. So yes, a figure or symbol can represent more than one thing. Xerxes can represent both. Xerxes and Alexander can both represent Donald Trump. All right? So another example of figures sometimes having two or more significations is the word lion. A lion can represent Jesus, the Lamb of God, or a lion can represent Satan, the roaring lion. See Revelation 5:5 and 1 Peter 5:8. Okay? You know, Jesus is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Satan is called a roaring lion that goes about seeking whom he may devour. Now, speaking about Grecia, I think we made it clear in the last, yes, we did make it clear the last, and I'm going to repeat this, that Grecia represents the world, okay? So, Daniel 11:3 says, "And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will." Daniel 2:39, "And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee," speaking here to King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, "another third kingdom," which is, of course, Grecia, kingdom of brass, "which shall bear rule over all the earth." Notice the similarity in all three of these passages. Daniel 7:6, "And after this I beheld another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it." All right? So Grecia rules with great dominion. He bears rule over all the earth. Dominion was given to it. This is an element of the third kingdom of Bible prophecy, but also this is an element of the dominion which modern Babylon will have over the whole earth. Okay, these are speaking to things at the end of the world. Daniel 8 verses 8 through 5 says, "And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes." That's the kingdom of Grecia. Daniel here is showing the defeat of Medo-Persia by Grecia, or Greece. "And he came to the ram," that's the ram being Medo-Persia, "that had 2 horns," which, by the way, Medo-Persia represents the United States at the end of the world. The United States also has 2 horns, Revelation 13:11, "which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power, and I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven." And then lastly we have Daniel 8 verses 21 and 22, "And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king." And of course that first king was Alexander. "Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his own power," not by his power. So we're still speaking here about Grecia. J. N. Andrews, in his book, The Sanctuary and the 2300 Days, page 10, tells us, "And the rough goat is the king of Grecia." Okay, we already read those verses. Let's drop down to the bolded there. "The power that should overthrow the Medes and Persians, and in their stead bear rule over the earth, is the empire of the Greeks. Greece succeeded Persia in the dominion of the world in BC 331. The great horn is here explained to be the first king of Grecia. It was Alexander the Great." So most definitely you have Alexander there, who is that first king of Grecia. Now, who does Greece symbolize prophetically speaking? Now, I'm not going to read the entire passage. I had this passage in the last presentation. Hopefully you remember that Sister White most clearly says, "So these Greeks, representing the nations, tribes, and peoples of the world," okay? It's without a doubt Greece prophetically speaking, represents the world, but not only the world, but Grisha represents the United Nations. Okay, and which is the dragon. The dragon of Revelation 12, 13, and 16. All right? And Sister White says, and again, we're not going to read the entire passage here, but she says in the last sentence of this next passage from Great Controversy, page 438, thus, while the dragon primarily represents Satan, it is in a secondary sense a symbol of pagan Rome. Now, you may be questioning, so the dragon, you're saying, is the same thing as Greece, and it is, okay? But it is also a symbol of pagan Rome. The principles of the United Nations are essentially pagan. In one sense, the United Nations is the descendant of pagan Rome. So you have all of these entities, I guess you would say, okay? You have Greece representing the world, the United Nations. The United Nations is the dragon. The United Nations has the same principles as pagan Rome, okay? It is atheistic. It is spiritualistic, communistic, all of these things. In Revelation 16, it says, and verses 13 and 14, it says, I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. Okay? The dragon representing the United Nations, the beast, the papacy, and the false prophet, the United States of America. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Again, Daniel 11:3 says, and a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Notice what Stephen Haskell in his book the story of Daniel the prophet tells us on page 185. Alexander, as a boy, showed an indomitable will, and he grew up to manhood, the trait strengthened. He was educated by Aristotle, the illustrious pupil of Plato, in the wisdom of the Greeks. When 20 years of age, Philip, king of Macedon, died, leaving the government to Alexander. Now remember, let's keep in mind that I'm saying that the Bible is telling us that Alexander represents Donald Trump. Okay? Let's keep that uppermost in our minds here, because the original title of this study, I was going to name it Donald Trump, the new Alexander the Great. Okay? Yes, Donald Trump will be Alexander the Great, at the same time being Xerxes. Okay? But especially Alexander the Great. Notice it says Alexander united the independent states of Greece. Now, what does Greece represent? The United Nations. Alexander united the independent states of Greece and placed himself at the head of their Amphictyonic Council. The Greeks were ambitious, and the new general organized an army for foreign conquest. The third kingdom was represented by a leopard with 4 wings on its back. This symbol covered the time not only when Alexander was king, but during its divided state as well. The swiftness of conquest is well represented by the wings of a fowl, the cunning, insinuating nature by the lithe form of the leopard, and by and the mingling together of truth and error in its doctrines and practices by the spots. Can the leopard change his spots? No more could Greece give truth without a portion of the false. No more can truth and error be separated in that system of education founded upon the wisdom of the Greeks, her philosophy, her myths, her nature teaching. Okay, again, this is from Stephen Haskell's book, The Story of Daniel the Prophet, page 185. We're going to come back to this paragraph here in just a moment, but let's read the next one first. This is from A.T. Jones's book, The Great Empires of the Bible, From Babylon to the Fall of Rome, page 154. It says, apprised of these impulses prevalent throughout the Grecian world, Alexander felt the necessity of checking them by a demonstration immediate as well as intimidating. The energy and rapidity of his proceedings speedily awed all those who had speculated on his youth, or had adopted the epithets applied to him by Demosthenes. Having surmounted in a shorter time than was supposed possible the difficulties of his newly acquired position at home, he marched into Greece at the head of a formidable army, seemingly about 2 months after the death of Philip. He was favorably received by the Thessalians, who passed a vote constituting Alexander head of Greece in place of Philip, which vote was speedily confirmed by the Amphictyonic assembly convoked at Thermopylae. So, let's go back to that previous paragraph. Now, before I go on, I want to try to explain something here. When you look at Daniel chapter 11, all right, again, it already had, as we brought out in the last presentation, it is fulfilled from 1989 to, or I should say, it is repeated, because it had its first fulfillment in the times starting with the times of Medo-Persia, and then it goes all the way to the end of the world, okay, from that point. Now we're, and Sister White, I'm not going to repeat it now, but she clearly says that Daniel 11 will be, the history of it will be repeated. So now we're starting from 1989. Okay, just to make sure I said things right before. Yes, okay, so it goes from 1989 all the way to the end of the world, okay? Now, that's a lot of history that is covered there. You know, a lot of history that is covered there. What I mean is that when you consider the history from Medo-Persia, if I had a whiteboard, I could show you there on the whiteboard, but I'm just going to try to explain it. You'll have to just picture it in your mind, okay? So, again, the initial, or the first application, the first fulfillment of Daniel chapter 11, you have hundreds of years covered there, from the time of Medo-Persia all the way to the end of the world. But in the second application, where all that history is repeated, everything is shrunk down, okay? Whereas in the first application, you had many kings that came into focus there, and one ruled and then another one. You had the king of the south back and forth. The king of the north was defeated by the king of the south, and the king of the south was defeated by the king of the north. Back and forth through ages, okay? Now it's all shrunk down from 1989 all the way to the end of the world. So considering that, it shouldn't be surprising to us, if you can wrap your mind around this, it shouldn't be a stretch of the imagination to see that both Xerxes and Alexander represent one person, Donald Trump, at the end of the world. That's all that I wanted to say on that subject. But again, let's go back to that previous paragraph in your notes on page 5, okay? It says that Alexander united the independent states of Greece and placed himself at the head of their Amphictyonic council. Now you'll have to look up that word Amphictyonic, okay? That's a subject in and of itself. But to me, it should be evident that this represents Donald Trump placing himself at the head of the United Nations General Assembly. That's the point I'm making in all of this. Donald Trump will, he has been elected as the President of the United States, but this is going to progress. And I base my position on this on the repetition of Bible prophecy, the refulfillment of Bible prophecy. And I'm not pulling this out of thin air. I'm giving you some evidences on all of this. Hopefully you will accept and see the evidences. All right? He will be the head of the United Nations. Like also, and you could also bring in Nimrod. Nimrod, you go back to Genesis chapter 10. He became, even though he's not named in Genesis chapter 11, Nimrod is the one who led out in the building of the tower, or the city of Babel, the Tower of Babel. Okay? Donald Trump is Nimrod, okay? He's not only, or Nimrod, I should say the other way around. Nimrod is Donald Trump. All right? Donald Trump is the antitype of Nimrod. Donald Trump is the antitype of Alexander. Donald Trump is the antitype of Xerxes. But we're not finished with this. Notice it says, the Greeks were ambitious, and the new general organized an army for foreign conquest. Already, Trump is the president-elect, and they're already talking about foreign conquest. And I know some people will stumble over that, but what I mean, whenever I say that, I'm talking about how Donald Trump is going to deal with China, how Donald Trump is going to deal with Iran, with Russia, okay? He's going to overcome all of them in one way or another. Maybe not necessarily by an armed conflict, but he's going to overcome them. Notice it says that Brother Haskell tells us there in that next paragraph, the swiftness of conquest is well represented by the wings of a fowl. When you go back there, as we read a while ago from Daniel 7, verse 6, it says that that leopard had 4 wings of a fowl, okay? And those wings represent swiftness, okay? Like an eagle he's swooping down. He's very swift to get the prey. All right? And we are already seeing this. Donald Trump is swiftly bringing together his cabinet, okay? And whenever he is inaugurated on January 20th, they're going to, as they say, and it has been said, they're going to hit the ground, what? Walking? Strolling? No. Running. All right? They're going to hit the ground running. All right? Also, it says the cunning, insinuating nature by the lithe form of the leopard and by the mingling together of truth and error in its doctrines and practices by the spots. Okay, the spots represent the mingling of truth and error. Isn't that Babylon? Go and do a study on Babylon. Do a study on the cup which Babylon serves the world to make them drunk. Okay? It's a mixture of truth and error. It is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is what Babylon is going to be. Donald Trump will be, in one sense, now I recognize the Pope, he's the real head, okay? But Donald Trump will be at the head, at least of the political part of it, of Babylon. And it is its principles are the mingling of truth and error. We see this especially in the sixth kingdom of Bible prophecy, but also consequently the seventh, okay? Babylon is full of this wine of Babylon, this mixture of truth and error. And again, in the next paragraph that we already read, it speaks of its rapidity, the rapidity of that third kingdom. It is speedy, all right? Notice it says that having surmounted in a shorter time than was supposed possible. This is what Donald Trump has done and is doing. He is surmounting difficulties in a shorter time than was supposed possible. The difficulties of his newly acquired position at home. He marched into Greece at the head of a formidable army, on and on. Okay? All right. So Alexander the Great placed himself at the head of the Amphictyonic Council of Greece, so will Donald Trump be the head of the United Nations. And here you have a definition of the word Amphictyonic, or Amphictyons, there in Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary. In Grecian history, an assembly or council of deputies from the different states of Greece, supposed to be called from Amphictyon, the son of Deucalion, but this opinion is probably a fable. 10 or 12 states were represented in this assembly. Drop down to the bottom sentence. They had an equal right to deliberate and vote in all matters relating to the common interest of Grecia. Is not this the United Nations? Now, if you look up the United Nations and you ask, and these days when you take your phone and you ask a question, most often it'll be answered by AI, okay? And I did that. And it denies, whenever you ask it, is the United Nations an Amphictyon? And it denies that. But I think it's pretty obvious that in one sense, yes, the United Nations is like the Grecian or the Greek Amphictyon. All right? They have an equal right, all the nations have an equal right to deliberate and vote in all matters relating to the common interest of the world, the nations of the world. All right? All right, so again, building on this subject of suddenness and rapidity, the quickness of that leopard, okay? In Daniel 7, verse 6, we already read that verse. And after this I beheld another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. All right? The third kingdom, Grecia, this comes from Uriah Smith's book, Daniel and the Revelation, page 131. The third kingdom, Grecia, is represented by this symbol. If wings upon the lion signified rapidity of conquest, they would signify the same here. The leopard itself is a swift-footed beast, but this was not sufficient to represent the career of the nation which it symbolized in this respect. It must have wings in addition. 2 wings, the number the lion had, were not sufficient. It must have 4. This would denote unparalleled sterility of movement, which we find to be historically true of the Grecian kingdom. The conquest of Grecia under Alexander have no parallel in history annals for suddenness and rapidity. Let me repeat. The conquest of Grecia under Alexander have no parallel in historic annals for suddenness and rapidity. And I believe if time would go on, we would find the same true concerning how things are turning or overturning since Trump has won the presidential election of November 5th, 2024. And we will see this even more after January 20th, 2025. All right? From Macedonia to the Ganges, which river Alexander nearly approached, is computed at least 1,100 leagues. Add to this the various turnings in Alexander's marches, first from the extremity of Cilicia, where the battle of Issus was fought, to the temple of Jupiter, Ammon in Libya, and his returning from thence to Tyre, a journey of 300 leagues at least, and as much space at least for the windings of his route in different places, we shall find that Alexander, in less than 8 years, marched his army upward of 1,700 leagues, or more than 5,100 miles, without including his return to Babylon. That's an amazing feat in those days, and it will be similar in our day. Okay, again, kind of expanding on this thought in concerning the rapidity and swiftness of the kingdom of Greece under Alexander, we are living in the time of the end. The fast fulfilling signs of the times declare that the coming of Christ is near at hand. The days in which we live are solemn and important. The Spirit of God is gradually but surely being withdrawn from the earth. Plagues and judgments are already falling upon the despisers of the grace of God. The calamities by land and sea, the unsettled state of society, the alarms of war are portentous. They forecast approaching events of the greatest magnitude. The agencies of evil are combining their forces and consolidating. They are strengthening for the last great crisis. Great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 9, page 11. Dear brothers and sisters, this paragraph in Volume 9 is present truth. Okay? A lot of people in Adventism these days talk about present truth, and there's not a lot of present truth out there. Whenever I type in the words Seventh-day Adventist on a search on my phone on the YouTube channels on Sabbath morning, I don't find much present truth out there. There's very, 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 very little. It's almost extinct, okay? But it's not extinct. There is present truth. But most of what is being proclaimed as present truth is not present truth. What I'm telling you today, this is present truth. And that word rapid there is a perfect complement to what we have been saying. When Donald Trump becomes President of the United States, he is being represented or symbolized by Alexander, who swiftly conquered the known world. Swiftly, rapidly conquered the known world. Donald Trump will swiftly conquer the world. Okay? And Sister White tells us the final movements will be rapid ones. Great changes are to take place in our world. We're already seeing them just in the past few weeks. And we haven't seen anything yet. Here's another one. Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 4, page 410. Our land is in jeopardy. The United States of America is in jeopardy. The time is drawing on when its legislators shall so abjure the principles of Protestantism as to give countenance to Romish apostasy. The people for whom God has so wonderfully wrought, Americans, strengthening them to throw off the galling yoke of popery, will by a national act. What is that national act? The enforcement of a national Sunday law. Give vigor to the corrupt faith of Rome, and thus arouse the tyranny which only waits a touch to start again into cruelty and despotism. Notice, with rapid steps, we are already approaching this period. In Sister White's day, they were rapidly approaching that time, but then God's people were not ready. So the Lord, by His own holy angels, held back those winds of strife, held back that Sunday law. But now we are over 100 years later. But now it has become present truth. Again, with rapid steps, since Donald Trump has come into office, especially since he's been elected, I should say. With rapid steps, we are already approaching this period. It's no time for playing games, Seventh-day Adventists. This is no time to be acting foolishly and making friends with Rome. This is no time for playing with false doctrines in the Adventist church. We need to go back to the old paths. When Protestant churches shall seek the support of the secular power, thus following the example of that apostate church, for opposing which their ancestors endured the fiercest persecution, then there will be a national apostasy which will end only in national ruin. The end is here. Get ready, get ready, get ready. The mighty King Donald Trump shall do according to His will. Daniel 11 verse 3 tells us, "And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to His will." Notice what Sister White says in Testimonies to Ministers, page 38. Kings and rulers and governors have placed upon themselves the brand of Antichrist, and are represented as the dragon who goes to make war with the saints, with those who keep the commandments of God and who have the faith of Jesus. In their enmity against the people of God, they show themselves guilty also of the choice of Barabbas instead of Christ. Donald Trump does not know the definition of Antichrist. He is confused, and he will place himself on the side of Antichrist according to the spirit of prophecy because of that. The king of the north, the papacy, shall do according to his will. That phrase, shall do according to his will, is found 4 times in the book of Daniel. The first time is speaking about God doing according to His will. But the other 3 times is speaking about, in Daniel 11 and verse 3, as we just read, it's speaking about kings, rulers, and governors, especially Donald Trump, doing according to his will. But the rest of these, in Daniel 11 verse 16, "But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed." This is the papacy. When you reach verse 14, it's about the papacy doing according to his will. After verse 14, when you have this phrase, "shall do according to his will," it's no longer speaking about the kings, governors, and rulers exactly. It's speaking about the papacy. Daniel 11:36 also. "And the king, the pope, shall do according to his will." The man of sin, doing according to his will. And Sister White, in Great Controversy, page 50, applies this to the papacy. "And he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done." In closing, Great Controversy, page 588. And the reason why I'm putting this statement in the record is because of the previous, there in what we've just spoken about, there in Daniel 11 and verse 3, you have Donald Trump doing according to his will, okay? The United States follows Rome. He follows the example of Rome. Here it is. Through the two great errors, the immortality of the soul and Sunday sacredness, Satan will bring the people under his deceptions. While the former lays the foundation of spiritualism, the latter creates a bond of sympathy with Rome. The Protestants of the United States will be foremost in stretching their hands across the gulf to grasp the hand of spiritualism. They will reach over the abyss to clasp hands with the Roman power. And under the influence of this threefold union, this country, the United States, will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling on the rights of conscience. Donald Trump will follow in the steps of Rome. He will do as the Pope did before him in the Dark Ages. He will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling on the rights of conscience. Now, let me say one more thing here, and then we'll close this study. I've just read to you that the United States will follow in the steps of Rome. Okay? Naturally, we should see that that the United States, its kings, governors, and rulers will follow in the steps of Rome. Now, it says of the United States, that lamb-like beast there in Revelation 13:11, that it was a lamb-like beast. How is it worded there? I saw another beast like a lamb. He was like a lamb. And in the very next phrase it says, and he spake as a dragon. This is speaking of the United States, as most Seventh-day Adventists know and understand. But consider this also, that this is also speaking about Donald Trump. To a lot of people, Donald Trump is a nice man. He's what's the word? He is a philanthropic. Okay? He has done a lot of good things. And some of these things I would agree with. Okay? In the beginning of his career, he's speaking as a lamb. But dear friends, later, when he becomes president, he will speak as a dragon. Because remember this too, and I just thought of this. Remember this. When you look, and I really don't even need to go to it, I can just tell you, but I'm going to go to it anyway. There in Revelation 13, it says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And Sister White, the Lord's messenger, tells us in Great Controversy, page 442, that the action of its legislative and judicial authorities is the speaking of the nation. Okay? The speaking of the nation. That lamb that speaks like a dragon, okay, he speaks as a dragon. This speaking is the action of its legislative and judicial authority. So it shouldn't take any stretch of the imagination. You know, this nation is speaking. The president is speaking. The president was like a lamb, and then he speaks like a dragon. All right. So hopefully I hope and pray that this presentation goes far. Okay? Not because of, for me, but for the sake of people that need to be awakened. There are going to be many souls that are lost, that they're not seeing the truth in these last days. They're not being fed meat in due season. They're not being fed present truth. People need to know this and be preparing. We are about to enter the eternal world. Okay? We are right on the edge of eternity. We need to wake up. Get ready, get ready, get ready. So, if you agree with this presentation, then by all means tap that like button so that it can be sent far and wide to those who are hungering for truth in these last days. Present truth. And if you have any comments or questions, then by all means place them at the bottom of this video. And if you haven't subscribed, then by all means do so. We thank you for joining us here at Jewels of Truth. We hope and pray that you will have a good day in the Lord.